My name is Iris Hole, and when I was 34 years old, I finally learned the truth about the night my grandmother died. I had driven 5 hours through the long open roads of Southern Virginia to get there, with a heavy yellow drafting compass sitting on the seat beside me. It had belonged to my Nana Evelyn. It didn't weigh much physically, but it felt like it carried everything. My mother Diane was turning 65 and had decided to throw a garden party at our old family home, the one with the long path of small gray stones that my sister and I used to race down as children. About 3 weeks before the party, a woman named Ruth Calloway called me. She was my grandmother's oldest and closest friend, and her voice was careful and gentle on the phone. She told me my grandmother would have wanted me to be there. She also said she had something to give me when the time was right. I hadn't been back to that house in 7 years. 7 years of silence and distance, during which my family had told everyone in our small town that I was a selfish woman who had returned only to take advantage of a sick old lady and then disappeared when there was nothing left to gain. I pulled into the stone driveway at 4 in the afternoon. Around 30 people were gathered on the back lawn, standing among white-clothed tables in the late afternoon light. Diane was in the center of a group, holding a glass of white wine and carrying herself like the host of a royal occasion. My sister Brooke was laughing too loudly near the flower arrangements. My father Tom was nodding along to someone's story about the local fair. I got out of my car, and not one person looked up. Diane saw me first. She was mid-story, moving her wine glass through the air. Her eyes met mine for exactly 1 second. Then she looked back at her audience, adjusted the silk scarf around her neck, and laughed at something someone said as though I hadn't just driven 5 hours to stand in her yard. Brooke spotted me next. She was 36 now, dressed carefully in something fitted with a gold necklace I had never seen before. When she noticed me, her smile thinned until it looked like a piece of paper folded too many times. She said, after a long pause, "Oh, you actually came." No hug, no warmth, nothing. My father gave me the kind of nod you give a neighbor you don't particularly like, then turned back to his conversation. My Aunt Carol kissed my cheeks and announced loudly to no one and everyone that she was surprised I had shown up at all. I had been home for less than a minute and already felt like a trespasser. Later, I was standing alone at the dessert table holding a small lemon bar, mostly because it gave my hand something to do. Brooke appeared with 2 women I didn't recognize and asked if I remembered them. I said politely that I didn't. One of the women asked what I was doing with my life these days, and before I could answer, Brooke stepped in with a bright and cheerful voice that barely concealed the cruelty underneath. She said I was still broke, still alone, and that my life didn't amount to much. She delivered it like a punchline. Across the yard, Diane heard and laughed. That laugh felt cold enough to change the temperature around me. I set down the lemon bar and looked at Brooke calmly. I told her it was good to see her too. She had been hoping for tears or anger, something she could carry to the other guests as further evidence of who I supposedly was. I didn't give her that. The story everyone in that town believed was a simple one. They thought I had come home when Nana Evelyn fell ill, stayed just long enough to position myself for an inheritance, and then disappeared the night she died, leaving my devoted mother to handle everything alone. My Aunt Carol had spent 7 years making sure that story reached every corner of that small community. People whispered about it at the party while I moved through the lawn feeling invisible. But what they didn't know was that I hadn't left because I wanted to. 7 years ago, when Nana got sick, I came home immediately. I drove her to every appointment. I read her favorite books to her, books about architecture and structure and design. I slept in her workroom for 3 months to make sure she was never alone through the night. My mother visited on Sundays. Then, one morning, she told me to go home and rest. While I was sleeping, she called to say Nana was gone. When I drove back in a panic, my mother met me at the door and told me that Nana hadn't wanted me there at the end. That sentence lived inside me for 7 years. Nana Evelyn had been a woman who drew architectural plans at a time when people didn't believe women belonged in that kind of work. She was precise and quietly determined, and she never needed anyone's approval. When I was 12, she gave me her yellow drafting compass and told me I didn't have to prove anything to anyone. I had tried to hold on to that for 7 years, through all the silence and the whispers and the shame the town had wrapped around my name. What my family didn't know was that for the past 6 years, I had built something real. I had started my own company focused on construction and building restoration. The largest development project currently underway in that very town was mine. But I hadn't come back to announce that. I had come back because Ruth asked me to, and because I love my grandmother. Ruth found me later in the evening and held me in a hug that felt like coming home. She pressed an old envelope into my hands and told me there was something I needed to read. Before I had the chance, Brooke stood up to give a speech about our mother, painting her as the woman who had stayed when everything was hard, who had carried the family through grief with grace. She looked at me while she spoke. I let her finish. Then Ruth told me the truth, quietly and clearly. She said Nana had asked for me every single day at the end. She said my mother had told Nana that I didn't want to come. She had kept us apart deliberately, and then told me afterward that it had been Nana's wish. I read the letter. In it, Nana said I should be free of them. She said I had nothing left to prove. My heart felt different after reading those words, lighter somehow, even as it ached. I could have walked to my car and driven home and let the letter be enough. But something had shifted. A man named Hal, who worked in the building industry and knew the local development project well, had noticed my car parked at the end of the driveway. He recognized it and put the pieces together. He realized who I was. Word moved through the party quickly, and I watched my family's certainty begin crack. My mother tried to redirect attention, to smooth things over the way she always had. But I walked to the front and spoke before the remaining guests. I told them what I had actually done during those 3 months when Nana was ill. I described the appointments and the nights in the workroom and the books we read together. Then Ruth stood and told everyone what she had witnessed. She said she had seen my mother lie to Nana. She said she had watched my grandmother ask for me and receive silence in return. My mother's composure began to come apart. People started to leave, one by one. Quietly, the way people do when they realize they've been comfortable with a story they should have questioned long ago. I didn't tell them about the company or the project or the car. None of that was why I had come. I had come for the truth about Nana, and the truth had finally been said out loud in the place where the lie had started. I walked back to my car, placed the drafting compass carefully on the passenger seat, and drove away without looking back. For the first time in 7 years, I felt something that I can only describe as free. After that day, things shifted in the town. People learned what had really happened. I kept working, kept building, and stayed close to Ruth. I eventually understood that the most valuable thing I carried wasn't the company or anything it had earned me. It was the truth and the knowledge that my grandmother had loved me and wanted me there. If someone has spent years building a lie about who you are, hold on. Keep being a good person. The truth arrives when it is meant to, and when it does, it changes everything.